The sun had barely crept over the horizon when my moving truck rumbled up the dusty road to my newly purchased ranch. After months of negotiating and inspections, I had finally closed on the 200-acre property nestled right at the edge of what was supposed to be a quiet, rural neighborhood. The land had everything I could ever want: open fields, a winding creek, a cozy log home in need of a little love, and enough space to finally get away from city noise and nosy neighbors. Or so I thought. That morning I was filled with nothing but optimism, completely unaware that by sundown I'd be standing in front of 2 sheriff's deputies trying to prove I wasn't a criminal. I hopped out of the truck with a grin on my face and my favorite mug of gas station coffee in hand. My buddy Jeremy was following in his pickup, towing my ATV, and behind him was a trailer packed to the brim with my tools, feed, lumber, and everything I needed to start restoring the old barn. The house sat about 400 yards from the main road, hidden by a line of pines and a winding gravel drive. As we pulled up, the dew still clung to the grass, and the air was thick with the smell of wildflowers and old cedar. I couldn't believe this place was mine. It was the kind of land folks dream about, far enough from neighbors to feel free, but close enough to town to grab parts when you needed them. I figured the only things I'd have to worry about were coyotes, tractor repairs, and the occasional wild hog. HOA politics hadn't even crossed my mind. Jeremy gave a low whistle as we parked. "You sure you want to rough it out here, boss?" he joked, stepping out and stretching his back. "You kidding? This is paradise," I replied. "Give me a few weeks and a new coat of stain on that porch, and this place'll be a dream." We wasted no time getting to work. Boxes went straight into the cabin, and I rolled out the tarp over the porch to sort tools and gear. By noon, we'd unpacked half the truck, set up my generator for temporary power, and even had burgers grilling on a portable propane stove. That's when I first saw her. She was standing at the edge of my property like a statue, arms crossed, a wide-brimmed sun hat shading her face. The bright red cardigan over her perfectly pressed khakis stood out like a warning light in the green. Surroundings. She didn't move, didn't wave, didn't even blink. Just stood there, glaring. "You expecting company?" Jeremy asked, nodding toward her. "Nope," I said. "You?" We both chuckled and got back to work, assuming she'd wander off. Maybe she was a curious neighbor. Maybe she just wanted to introduce herself. What we didn't know was that this woman, Karen, as we'd come to know her, had already pulled out her phone and dialed the county sheriff. An hour later, we were halfway through setting up the shelves in my workshop when the crunch of tires on gravel echoed from the driveway. 2 patrol SUVs pulled up, lights flashing, but no sirens. Jeremy and I looked at each other, confused. I stepped out, wiping sawdust off my hands. "Afternoon, officers," I said casually. "Something I can help you with?" The lead deputy, a grizzled man with mirrored sunglasses and the look of someone who'd seen it all, didn't smile. "We got a report of a break-in on this property. Neighbor said she saw unknown individuals trespassing." I blinked. "You're kidding." "I'm afraid not." "You have proof of ownership?" I nodded, reaching for the folder I had on the porch. Table. "Of course. Just signed the papers 3 days ago. I've got the deed, bill of sale, everything." Karen appeared moments later like a ghost behind the patrol cars. She marched up, waving a clipboard, her face twisted with fury. "This man is lying," she snapped. "This land is under HOA jurisdiction, and I've never seen him before in my life. He refused to show ID and was acting suspicious. I demand you remove him immediately." I stood there, stunned. "Ma'am, I own this property. No offense, but who are you?" "I'm Karen Westlake," she said, drawing herself up. "President of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association." I glanced at the deputy. "Willow Creek? This isn't Willow Creek. This land was subdivided from an old rancher's property back in the 80s. I checked. No HOA, no covenants, no dues. That's why I bought it." Karen's face went red. That's impossible. All land within these boundaries falls under our oversight. You can't just move in and build whatever you want without approval. There are standards. Though, Deputy took the folder from me and looked through the paperwork. He nodded slowly. Title matches. This man owns the property outright. And according to the county GIS map, he's right. It's not part of Willow Creek, Karen fumed. Well, I don't care what the map says. He's a danger to the neighborhood. Who knows what kind of people he'll bring in? I've already seen beer cans and trash. Jeremy, standing nearby with a burger in one hand and a wrench in the other, laughed out loud. That was my lunch, lady. The deputy handed back my documents. Sir, you're good to go. Sorry for the inconvenience. We had to respond. I nodded, but my jaw was tight. No problem, officer. But just to be clear, I don't want this woman stepping foot on my land again. I'll note it, he replied. Ma'am, this isn't your jurisdiction. Karen was steaming, but she said nothing more. She turned and stormed off, muttering something about, not the end of this. And she meant it. Over the next few days, the peace I'd dreamed of turned into an all-out Cold War. It started with small things. A neighbor's kid showed up saying his mom told him not to go near the scary man's house. Then came the emails, dozens of them. Karen somehow found my email through the property registration and began flooding my inbox with messages titled Community Expectations, Architectural Review Required, and Cease Unauthorized Modifications. I ignored them at first. But when she showed up again, this time with a clipboard, a camera, and what she called a compliance checklist, I knew this wasn't going to blow over. She walked my fence line, snapping photos, muttering to herself and stopping to measure my gravel drive. When I confronted her, she insisted she had the right to inspect for property harmony violations. Lady, I said, you don't have a single legal right to be here. I'm not in your HOA. I'm not in your subdivision. You're trespassing. She glared. We'll see about that. The next morning, my mailbox had been ripped out of the ground and tossed in the creek. That's when I stopped playing nice. The morning after my mailbox was torn out and flung into the creek, I woke up with a fire in my gut. I had come to this ranch for peace, not to be bullied by some cardigan-wrapped tyrant who thought she ruled everything she could see. Karen had pushed one step too far. I stood on my porch, sipping my coffee and staring at the muddy footprint on the edge of my driveway. Her footprint, no doubt, and made a decision. This wasn't going to be just another ignore it and it'll go away situation. Karen had mistaken kindness for weakness. Now, I was going to remind her that not only did I know the law, I'd spent 2 decades enforcing it. See, what Karen didn't know, what she never thought to ask, was that before I bought this land, I spent 20 years working for the U.S. Marshals Service. I knew how to handle threats, write up evidence, and most importantly, I knew how to win battles without throwing a single punch. She thought I was some clueless country boy who wandered into her kingdom. But she had just poked the wrong bear. First, I started with documentation. I pulled out my drone, launched it from the back deck, and flew it over the entire property. I took clear footage of my fence lines, my home, the exact points of access. I recorded my conversations, backed up every email, and filed an official trespass notice with the sheriff's department, naming Karen specifically. I knew it wouldn't stop her right away, but I also knew she'd eventually step too far. And when she did, I'd be ready. The very next day, Karen showed up again. This time, she brought backup, her husband, a sullen, defeated man with a comb-over, and a laminated HOA security volunteer badge around his neck. They walked up to my front gate like they owned it, snapping more photos and shaking their heads disapprovingly. I leaned over the porch railing. Can I help you with something? Karen didn't flinch. Yes. I'm here to issue you a final notice. You have continued to violate Willow Creek's covenants by installing unauthorized structures like that trailer and those livestock pens without submission to the design committee. You have 48 hours to comply or we'll initiate fines. I laughed out loud. You're gonna fine me? On my own land? That isn't even part of your HOA? Karen bristled. All land within 2,000 feet of the Willow Creek entrance falls under annexation eligibility. That's not a thing, I shot back. This isn't Sim City. She stepped closer, clearly angry. We have standards, sir. If you won't follow them, I'll have to escalate this to the board. Great, I said. Tell your board to bring a warrant next time they come on my land. Until then, stay on your side of the fence. Her husband tried to speak, but I waved him off. Don't waste your breath, buddy. You've got better things to do than chase your wife's fantasy of HOA world domination. They stomped off, furious, and for a moment I thought maybe they'd finally gotten the message. But the worst was yet to come. A few nights later, I was in my workshop when I noticed flashing lights outside. Again. This time, 3 sheriff's vehicles and a county code enforcement officer. Karen must have really turned up the pressure. I walked out calmly, hands in plain view. The deputy in charge shook his head as he approached. Sir, I hate to bother you again, but we got another complaint. This time she says you're illegally dumping refuse on the land and running an unlicensed business. What kind of business? I asked. She says she saw clients coming and going, claimed you're operating a mechanic shop out of your barn. I couldn't help but laugh. That would be Jeremy and his 2 sons helping me fix my tractor. And the only dumping I've done is a few bags of mulch for the garden. The code enforcement officer walked around the barn, clipboard in hand. Everything seems in order here. Clean, orderly, no signs of illegal activity. Frankly, it looks like you're doing a great job improving the property. That didn't stop Karen, though. When they left, she was parked at the end of the driveway, glaring at me like I had just personally burned down her clubhouse. I raised my coffee mug and a mock toast and walked back inside. At this point, I realized I had only 2 options: fight fire with fire, or build a firewall so strong that no amount of HOA madness could breach it. So I did both. First, I contacted my attorney. I wasn't going to just play defense anymore. I wanted to know if I had grounds to sue Karen for harassment, trespassing, and malicious intent. My lawyer grinned. Oh, absolutely, and more. We'll start with a cease and desist letter, but if she keeps this up, we can take her for every dime the HOA's misusing. Then I did something Karen never expected. I started attending the Willow Creek HOA meetings. Yes, I wasn't technically a member, but I found a little loophole. Since I was within 2 miles and a former federal officer, I had every legal right to attend as a concerned citizen when public policy or neighborly disputes were being discussed. So I showed up, wearing a suit, sitting front row, and asked questions, lots of questions. How is the HOA allocating its reserve funds? What's the legal justification for enforcement over non-member properties? What bylaws give the president power to act unilaterally without full board approval? You could practically hear Karen's teeth grinding from the podium. It wasn't long before other residents started asking the same questions. Turned out Karen had been bending the rules for years, selectively enforcing petty violations while ignoring bigger issues, like the fact that the community pool hadn't been maintained in 2 summers or that the walking trail lights had gone dark for months. Then came the real bombshell. At one meeting, a quiet man from the back raised his hand and said he was an independent auditor. He'd been asked anonymously to review HOA finances. What he found wasn't just mismanagement. It was a full-blown scandal, misused funds, fake invoices, payments to companies run by Karen's relatives. The room erupted. Karen turned pale. Someone yelled, "We need a vote to remove her!" And they did. By the time I walked out of that meeting, Karen was no longer HOA president. She was under investigation by the county, and as poetic justice would have it, she was served her own trespassing summons the very next morning. Courtesy of yours truly. Peace returned to my ranch after that. The mailbox stayed in place. No more mysterious knocks on my gate. No more drone flyovers or clipboard-wielding visitors. Just the wind, the trees, and the long, quiet evenings I had moved there to enjoy. But the best part? About 3 weeks later, I got a handwritten letter in my mailbox. It was from one of the Willow Creek board members. "Dear Sir," it began, "I just want to say thank you. You reminded us what integrity looks like." I smiled, folded the letter, and tucked it into my journal. Karen had tried to mark me as an intruder. Instead, I became the man who cleaned up her mess.